At KIBS, we use coding as a way of understanding and introducing new bits of language. We've seen that it helps with problem solving in a way, similar way to maths, but in more contextual ways, it actually works better than maths. You see a varying ways of problem solving, of using it, of solving problems, of understanding the answers that you can have within coding. It shows critical thinking. It shows that no matter how many mistakes you make when you are coding, there's no problem with that. Making a mistake 5, 10 times, as long as you get towards the answer by the end and you've understood the things along the way and you're not making the same mistakes. How we teach it at KIBS is we begin with what we call offline coding. So offline coding is using the basics of coding and the understanding, the language of looping things and commands and all of these things without the use of technology. So they will use paper, they will use maps, they will use little toys, things to move across a map. So it may be a maze where they've got to direct a character across and they've got to write down using arrows on their paper. And then within that, into year 2, we then move into using technology, using the iPads, using other things to then apply those skills. And throughout this process, whether it's in year 1 all the way through to year 4 or even moving into secondary, the making mistakes part is an important part of it. You will not go through, and we try to emphasize this with the children, you will not go through your coding life at school without making mistakes. But getting them to understand that the mistakes that they make are fine, and as long as they learn from them, and they don't keep making those same mistakes, then that's all part of the process of getting towards understanding what coding is and understanding what it's for. So we've taught it across there, and we've then brought it into cross-curricular ideas. So in year 4, we had a coding week in 2021, where the entire week was dedicated to coding, where they were introduced to the different applications that we use. They recapped on certain parts that they'd learned earlier in the year, and then they went into applying this with different software and hardware that they'd been used. In terms of the hardware, we have Logitech pencils, which are used in the slightly younger years in Key Stage 1, where they will use these Logitech pencils to get used to gripping and get used to writing on things, and they will also then use it to solve problems creatively, where they will use the pencil to draw something on a program, and it will then be coded into that program as well. In terms of hardware for year 3 and year 4, we have Sphero bolts. We have Lego We Do kits where children build Lego sets, and there's multiple different ways that they can use these kits to build things and then use the program that's dedicated to it to then code that machine, that robot, to move in a certain way to complete a certain task. And it's all using the same kind of language that they've learnt in year 1, year 2, all working all the way through. In terms of software, we have a number of different softwares that we use, programs, apps that we use from the iPads. A lot of them are used in multiple years, depending on what they are. But in year 1, we start with Codable, we look at Scratch, Scratch Junior, which are the basic building blocks of coding. Introducing commands, introducing loops, introducing all of the really basic stuff, debugging programs and finding the mistakes within them. Every year, we also use some part of the Apple coding curriculum, depending on the app that we're using, but it always comes back to that. So starting in year 1, we get using Get Started to Code, which is what Get Started to Code 1, and then in year 2, moving on to Get Started to Code 2, then moving into Learning to Code, whether that's Learning to Code 1 with Swift, or whether it's very similar Learning to Code with Tinker, and in year 3, and then, like I said, moving into year 4 with the Swift one. And all of that understanding of the language, that understanding of the real basics of it is then what helps when they're coming to applying that in Spheros, with the Legos, with Osmo, with any of the other hardwares that we use or the other softwares that we use. They've got that basic understanding that they got from the Apple curriculum, from having all of that at the start.